The Committee on Environment, Land, Agriculture, and Procurement Reform reconvenes this public hearing. It is 6:02 p.m. on Friday, February 9, 2018. Notice has been put out to all the senators. They possibly are either watching this from their television, their office, or they also have access to the proceedings tonight on YouTube. So I'm sure they'll take the time to listen in. The purpose of this public hearing is to receive testimony on Bill 223-34 COR, introduced by myself. It's an act to rezone Lot 5010-1 new, Lot 5042-1, and Lot 5042-R1 in the municipality of Dedido from R2 Residential Multiple Dwelling Zone to M2 Industrial Zone for the construction of a new Guam Power Authority Northern Power Generation Plant. Notice of this evening's public hearing was provided to senators, stakeholders, and the local media, as well as published in the Guam Daily Post on February 2nd, 2018 for the 5-day notice, and February 7th, 2018 for the 48-hour notice, thus meeting the requirements of the Open Government Law. The committee will continue to receive written testimony until 4 p.m. on Monday, February 12th, 2018. Please address testimony to Senator Thomas Seada, Chairperson, Committee on Environment, Land, Agriculture, and Procurement Reform, and can be dropped to the mailboxes here at the legislature or emailed to office@senatorada.guam. So just a few rules of procedure for tonight. We will begin this evening with, of course, the opening statement from the CCU chairman and a presentation by GPA, which will take us about 30 minutes, understand? And then following the presentation, I was going to open it up for committee members, if they do arrive, for another 30 minutes to direct questions to GPA. And then we have a number of people that have signed up to provide oral testimony, and so far I think it's manageable, but I may have to put a limit on the amount of time that people speak. We can stay here till 10 o'clock. Our standing rules allows us to stay here till 10. We'll have to come back Monday, but I would prefer that we limit our oral testimony to 5 minutes, and if anybody has more to say than what they can squeeze in 5 minutes, then I would recommend that you provide that in written testimony. I will also defer to, as we open up after the presentation is done, there are a couple of government officials who are here this evening, the Director of Department of Land Management, and I would like to have him be the first to provide their testimony after the presentation is done and the Q&A with GPA. Mr. Botha, are you going to be in addition to, or just you providing support? Okay, fine. And then after that, we'll go ahead. I got Mr. Linzangan. Oh, I'm sorry. Dr. Jensen, are you here on behalf of UOG and WERI? Okay, and so then I'll have you come up after Director Borja to give your oral presentation. Now, before we start, let me just answer the question that a number of people have asked. Why are we doing this why are we doing this rezoning through the legislature? Normally, a rezoning will go through the Guam Land Use Commission, and it will be taken up, heard, and decided upon by 5 members appointed and confirmed by the legislature. In this particular case, I think that this project is a very important project to the island, and it merits having maximum exposure as to what is being discussed here. And so this hearing tonight is being televised so that anybody in the whole island can certainly can listen to it. It's being recorded. If anybody can't listen to it this evening, they can always bring it up on YouTube, the legislature's website, to basically catch up on what was said. This is important because this is the first time that we're actually going to be building a power plant. Well, we've got other power plants up north, but a significant project such as this. So I wanted to give it maximum transparency, and I would like that I think this project merits having 15 elected officials to the legislature discuss it, deliberate on it, and then cast their votes as to whether we're going to rezone it or not. So with that, I'm going to go ahead then, and you can give the opening, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Ada. For the record, my name is Joey Duenas. I'm the chairman for the Consolidated Commission on Utilities. I'm here today to request your support for Bill 223-34, introduced by yourself, Senator Ada, to rezone lots 5010-1U, 5042-1, and 5042-R1 from R2 to M2, authorizing the Guam Power Authority to build and operate new power generation, accessories, and related functions on said lot. The future of our island community depends on many things, such as a good economy, a good educational system, a good public health care, a safe community, and a clean environment, to mention a few. The Guam Power Authority and also the Guam Waterworks Authority are the foundation of our island community. Without electricity and water, you do not have a community or a future. GPA provides the very essential service of reliable electrical power, 98% of the time, I might add, which powers everything our island community depends on. Planning is at the very core of GPA's overall strategy to provide reliable, clean, and affordable electrical power to its ratepayers. As recently as April 2014, GPA sponsored an integrated resource planning forum down in Tumon to discuss and inform our community about the multi-level planning efforts of GPA to improve its conventional generation assets and to integrate renewable energy into its mix. Planning is not just a recent effort. Planning started just about 50 years ago when GPA was first established as the first autonomous agency within the government of Guam. We have informed the community about our efforts to develop and implement about 180 megawatts of utility-scale renewable energy along with energy storage. Now tonight, we are going to address the other half of our planning efforts, our new conventional generation, which will enable us to do more renewable energy, allowing us to improve service and control costs for our ratepayers. I'd like to now turn the presentation over to the General Manager of GPA, Mr. John Benavente.
Okay, John.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you for the opportunity to testify on Bill 223. I'll try to keep it below 30 minutes, but I do have a set. Again, the Guam Power Authority respectfully requests the Legislaturan Guahan to support Bill 223 introduced by yourself. Again, rezoning of lots 5010-1U, 5042-1, and 5042-R2 from R2 to M2 to build and operate a new power generation plant, accessories and related functions on said lot. I'd like to start out with, considering we're talking about rezoning, I'd like to start out with actually the zoning of the Ukudu area. And here is the proposed site that we're talking about for rezoning. And as could be seen, the area is really a mix of different types of zoning, from hotel to commercial to R2 and M1 light industrial. The site we're talking about is actually really surrounded by a lot of light industrial. So in this area, it could almost be said that the Ukudo area is substantially light industrial. Next. Next, I'd like to talk about the
You're going to need to hold the mic closer to your mouth.
Closer?
Yeah.
Yes, that's great. Next, I'd like to talk about the generation infrastructure. How are we going to get the power out from this facility, the site that we're talking about? So again, here's the proposed site. What we're going to be, the Harmon substation is right here, which is the heart of the system. We'll be putting in 115 kV transmission line directly from the site, straight out about 1,000 feet right into the heart of the system. In terms of fuel oil and natural gas lines, you'll actually be coming through the right-of-way existing that currently we use that goes all the way from Cabras all the way to Tangisan Power Plant. But actually, we're going to divert through the right-of-way and feed the new power plant from here. We're also going to bring in wastewater, treated water, if you will, called gray water, and use that to cool the generators. All our current generators are cooled by seawater. So we bring in ocean water, cool it through condensers, and then we send it back to the ocean. Something that, again, US EPA has for years. We've had environmental permitting issues with them. So again, we're going to use sewer, wastewater, about 3 million gallons a day. And then sewer from the potable system really is going to come to an existing collection point right here. I'll just take a quick note to point out that we had looked at several areas here in terms of potential sites for the power plant. And in the process, we had looked at one directly next adjacent to the existing wastewater treatment plant, and one right about here. And again, those sites, the biggest difference really to the preferred site is the transmission system that has to come from here all the way over here, out of Route 3, and then in towards and pass right adjacent to the GRMC into the new power plant. Those are almost 1.5 miles to 2 miles in distance. Again, more exposure, not as reliable as the system that we're to the site that we're proposing now. And again, I'll explain what other characteristics are there that makes this site our preferred site. Next. But let's talk as to why we do need a new power plant. Again, our Cabras power plant is 43 years old, and by the time we get this new plant built, we'll be 47 years old. The Cabras 3 and 4, our newest plant, is about 19 years old. So again, it's been a while since conventional units have been built for the authority. The current plants are expensive to operate. It takes about 80 personnel to run Cabras 1, 2, 3, and 4. It's inadequate. We have inadequate capacity today for future growth. I will show you very shortly that if we don't build a new power plant, we won't have adequate growth to meet this, the military build-up as soon as 3 to 4 years from now. Not compatible with solar PV system. We'll show you again that the base loads were really meant to run 24/7, but to be compatible with solar PVs, they have to back out in the daytime, and these plants can back out in the daytime. To be compatible, you have to be able to turn them on and off as necessary so you can allow solar PV in the daytime. You can't turn this machine on and off on a regular basis. So again, they're not compatible with solar PV, and therefore prevents us from adding more solar PV, which is a good thing for the island, which I will show in the later slides. One fuel burning capability, we burn RFO. Of course, we burn oil. The majority of it is really RFO as our main source. And again, it's really one source. If the price of RFO goes up, we pay the price, and there's no flexibility in trying to control our costs. The emissions is hazy and non-compliant. As mentioned, the US EPA regulations for rice mag requires us to convert to cleaner fuel or put in emission control. The Cabras 1, 2, 3, and 4 to burn ultra-low sulfur diesel the regulations actually came into effect, and right now we're potentially susceptible to about over $150 million of penalties if we don't work out a consent decree with US EPA. And again, this plan will provide us that opportunity. Tsunami, storm surge, our vulnerability. No one's really talked about this before, but here's an opportunity to build a conventional power plant, and probably is going to be our last power plant that we build. We'll be here for the next 30 to 50 years. Being that the case, I was sure that we're quite vulnerable with where we are today with our power plants. And as everyone understands, with climate change making, and whether we believe it or not, there's an opportunity to protect the island and its economy from such a disaster. When we go over to the new power plant site, again, the reliability is substantially increased, and the efficiency is substantially increased. Ultra-low sulfur diesel is a more expensive fuel. However, we're going to burn less of it because of more efficient machine to offset the additional higher cost from the type of fuel that is going to burn. It's only going to take about 30 to 40 personnel to run this facility compared to the 80 to 90 that I mentioned, that I showed earlier. This allows for about 10 to 15-year growth. And again, how much growth is going to happen with the military buildup? Well, we could take care of the growth with the new plan. It will be compatible with the solar PV. More importantly, it would allow for more solar PV in the future. So what happens here is these machines can ramp up or ramp up and down very quickly to counter the intermittency of renewables. Furthermore, they could be turned on and shut off every day to be able to, again, allow renewables in the system. If no new power plant comes into play, BSMA, the 180 that we have planned today is the limit that we can put into the system. And I'll show you why that's not necessarily a good thing. Diversify with ultra-low sulfur diesel and natural gas. Now we have an opportunity for two types of fuel. So that if ultra-low sulfur diesel starts to climb like it is during these days, we can put in natural gas and be able to reduce our costs in the system. So again, I like to always note that there's three things that are very important here with this power plant that will allow us to control our future LEAC. That's solar PV, ultra-low sulfur diesel, and natural gas. Today, we have no control because of the one fuel scenario. Emissions, we will show that it really is clear, clean, and it is compliant. It is the cleanest fuel that US EPA pushes, which is ultra-low sulfur diesel and natural gas. Natural gas a little cleaner than ultra-low sulfur diesel. And as far as vulnerability, because of the location over 300 feet above sea level, we're not subjected to tsunami risk. Why would GPA not meet its demand with our new power plant in 2020? Let me just go through this column first. Say in 2015, before the Cabrest 1 and the Cabrest 3 and 4 explosion, we had a 299 megawatts of base load, total capacity of 419. The demand then was 249. So when you take what is left, what reserve is left, it's 170. But if you take the two largest units, because one is down on overhaul and the other one fails, you got to have enough capacity to reserve margin to cover that. Otherwise, you're into load shedding. That's what happened. We still have 38. After the explosion in Cabrest 3 and 4, we were able to put in 80 megawatts to cover for that. So we bring our capacity to 408. And we have actually derated Cabrest 1 and 2 from 132 to 120. Because realistically, we can go up there to 66 megawatts today and stay there. 60 we can, but not 66. So here we are, we have about 27 megawatts of reserve. If the growth, contrary to what may have been said, we have been growing close to 5 megawatt every year for the past 3 years. So therefore, when we start looking out even towards 2021, your growth, our demand could be up as far as 283. Taking what we have, which is all we have today, you're going to end up with just about 5 megawatt above the minimum 120 megawatts of reserve. That is a challenge. And that's fine if we have new power plants coming on the line by then, but if we don't, that's a plan for disaster, no? Plan for failure. I'd like to also note here's our renewable portfolio that we're looking over the next several years. In 2015, we had 0, but then we put in the NRG. We have 25 megawatts of renewables. By again, that's 2018 today, 25. But by 2021, we will have about 185 megawatts of renewables. If you recall, we have the Hanwha 60 megawatts. We have the KEPCO 60 megawatts in the process of being awarded. We have a phase 3 bid for 40 megawatts on Navy leased land. That is in the bid process today. So we will have about 185 megawatts. And why is that important? I'm going to show you this mix. In 2015, 98% of the energy is generated by baseload, which is the lowest cost for the utility system and its ratepayers. After the explosion, we generate the 16.5% from the peakers. These are non-baseload units. You usually generate from baseload, not non-baseload, because it's going to cost you more. So again, that's the same to 2018. But here comes the renewables. So therefore, we're dropping down on the peakers. And when the new power plant comes on board, this 185 megawatts of renewables is going to generate 26% of the island's energy. The balance will come from the new base load, and now we're down to 1% on peakers. This is the best combination economics-wise for the community. Next. Cost savings per scenario. The existing generation mix today, 2018, about 195 million, at about $85 per barrel ultra-low sulfur diesel. If US EPA took us to court and require us to comply and tell us and they win and we have to burn ultra-low sulfur with the units that we have today, our cost is going to jump up to 246 million, which is an additional $51 million per year. This is every year, for as long as it takes until we get a new power plant on. With the new power plant and the 85 megawatts of renewables we're talking about, we're actually going to offset our cost today to be a savings of almost $10 million with a combination of the renewable and the new power plant. If oil continues to rise above $85 a barrel for ultra-low sulfur diesel, LNG can come in. LNG now, I estimate about the equivalent of $58 a barrel oil is a natural gas equivalent of what it will cost us to bring in natural gas, shipment, and also infrastructure. So therefore, you can see a drop of $54 million that could occur for the people of Guam. So as you can see, really these three scenarios of solar, the new power plant, ultra-low sulfur diesel, and LNG is how we can control our costs in the future. Today, we have no choice. It's just raise the LEAC or reduce it depending on what oil does. Next. Why build a new power plant in Ukudu? Increased reliability. Is near the GPA substation with many underground transmission lines. Close to villages with the largest population, not subjected to tsunamis. It allows for continuous operation through typhoons, quick recovery for all customers after typhoons. We're not going to tax the aquifer. We're going to use sewer water, wastewater that normally goes out to the ocean. We're going to take that, treat it, and use that for the cooling of the power plant. We do not impact the aquifer. We are not over the aquifer. It's compatible with surrounding land uses. Really, as I showed in the map, the zoning earlier, industrial, commercial, residential probably already exists in the area. The new plant's technology located in the U.S. and many mixed-use developments in a diverse community. So a power plant really can coexist with many of these other issues that have been brought up here. Let's talk about the heart of the system and the transmission. Here's the Harmon substation. There's an underground line a transmission line that goes all the way to towards the hospital. There's one that goes all the way up to the airport. There's one that goes all the way to Tumon down to Tamuning. Then there's a line that's going to be put in by the military that will go all the way up to Anderson. There's one existing line from Anderson to Dedido. All we have to do is loop this, the power plant there. Imagine what you can do with a system like that. You can run, Tumon is close to being completely underground. We can run it through a storm. We continue to do hybrid system through the rest of the island. We can begin to recover quicker. And one day, maybe 20 years from now, the island will be mostly underground concrete pole. We can do a lot of things. Tsunami, this is the source of this is a modeling done by the University of Hawaii professor under a project for Office of Homeland Security. This is showing what could happen in Apro Harbor should a 8.5 tsunami hit up in Japan. And as you can see, the red part right here is our Cabras power plant area. So again, we're potentially at risk. All our base loads are down at Cabras. So again, in the future, if anything happens, and Lord behold, I hope not, but we're very vulnerable. So the new power plant provides us the base load so that we can continue life and the economy on this island if anything happened here. Next. Ukudu is the best location. We did look at several sites, actually more than the 4 we're showing here, but let me talk about the Cabras PD, the Tengisan site, the one next to the Northern Wastewater Treatment, and the Ukudu site. We actually have 12 criteria to evaluate what made the best site for the new power plant. And as you can see, the Cabras, PD, and Tengisan, the biggest part of this is that there is inadequate space in those facilities to park the power plant that we need. Furthermore, they're subjected to tsunamis. So again, that's a major part that actually took them out of the equation. The Northern Wastewater Treatment line adjacent to it is also another good place. However, I will show that the cost is substantial also compared to the proposed site that we're actually, I would like to say, blessed that we were able to, people came forward to want to sell this facility area to us. I think it was a real blessing for the utility in that respect. So again, we did look at the various sites. These are the criteria. We ranked them. And this is how we came to the Ukudu site. Next. We started with 25 acres footprint, trying to minimize our exposure. However, we noted more that we really had to have a bigger physical area for physical security and a buffer. And then as time goes by, we really expanded it to make sure that we had adequate physical security, an adequate buffer around the area, because that is seen to be a major concern of the community. And again, it could provide for future needs. So this is that area that we're talking about. As you mentioned earlier, why did we bring it to the legislative process? As you had mentioned, really, this is a major monumental decision for the island, and really it should be decided by the elected body legislature. In addition to that, we have gone through the process as we would be done to go through the GLUC process. So we didn't just, we did a lot of work to show that, in fact, the information that was required to go through the process was provided by us. Next. The location in Ukudu provides the greatest benefits I have mentioned earlier, provides savings and greatest value. It's a saving of about $80 million to the ratepayer to construct the power plant where it is now versus out by the wastewater treatment in itself. In addition to that, like I mentioned earlier, you don't have 3 sets of 90-foot towers, monotubes, running across Marine Drive or coming across the road going out to Ipaw. Because now the transmission line is directly 1,000 feet away from the Harmon substation. Otherwise, we would take both sides of the right-of-way and have to feed in 3 monotube towers to carry the transmission line that will carry the power from the power plant to the Harmon substation. So again, in addition to that, aesthetic issue, we're saving the ratepayers $80 million in capital investment, financing, interest during construction for the saving of the infrastructure we didn't have to build. Next. What I'd like to note here is that really, this is what a lot of people are used to. This is MEC 8 and 9, and this is Caraburst 1 and 2. You can see the haze that are coming out of the power plant. Here are the, as you can see, all these stacks are 200 feet high. This is the PD 1, 2, 3, and 4, 1, 2, 3, 5, and 6. We also have the 40 megawatt MSCT right here in the center. This is a combustion turbine unit. If you can see, the stack is clear. That unit is running ultra-low sulfur diesel. We turn it on for this picture so that you can see the difference between what is perceived will be the new plan, which is actually not going to be the same. It's going to be a clean emission, clean and much cleaner and clear emission. So again, here's the one generation, the next generation, and you're seeing it's going to be the profile will probably be about 145-foot stack, but again, the profile will not be as big as the buildings that you see here. Next. I'd like to note that right at Harmon Loop Road, next to the Sports Center, next to JM Guerrero, next to the soccer, there's the Machechi power plant. That power plant also burns ultra-low sulfur diesel. That power plant runs every day today because it needs to counter the renewables that are constantly going like this. As you can see, the stacks are clear, the emissions, there's no noxious odor or anything in that respect. So again, the new plan, it's actually going to be cleaner than this. It's going to have more emission controls. And again, this gives you a perspective as to what the new plan will look on. Next. Here's a tabulation of the Caraburst 1 and 2 and the proposed emission of the new plan, and even the National Ambient Air Quality Standard, which is what the nation is most stringent needs program. As you can see, several 100,000% increase in cleanliness, less emission, less sulfur dioxide, carbon monoxide, nitrogen oxide, and particulate matter. Particulate matter is what makes you see the haze that comes up. Next. A new power plant in Nukudu will be safe and quiet. It will have very clean emissions, reliable and efficient. It will be diversified fuel options between ultra-low sulfur diesel and natural gas. It will meet and exceed permitting regulations, not only local but also federal, US EPA, Guam EPA, and other local entities. Stabilize and improve the grid reliability. Today, the grid is at risk with the renewables that we bring in. However, this plan will actually provide stronger reliability. In addition, I mentioned we're going to put in 180 megawatts by 2021. Once the new plan is approved to move forward, we can actually plan on another 180 megawatts of renewables at a lower cost that would actually, again, I will show, heads our costs into the future so that no longer are you going to be seeing the erratic movement up and down of fuel oil related costs, but more a consistent, reduced, and more stable cost. And again, it eliminates tsunami and storm risk. Next. Being a good neighbor, planning close within a building, close with huge noise reduction measures. We include vibration monitoring to make sure everything is taken care of, automatically and safely shuts down if anything unusual happens. Ultra sulfur emissions, virtually non-odorous. Stack height dilutes the odor. You don't necessarily want to stack too low. That's why the stack height is actually modeled so that you don't have odor around it. And that under extreme conditions, the gas would allow it to rise. The gas will allow the thing to rise and actually blend into the air, but so that you don't have the odor. And again, ultra-low sulfur, lower natural gas is cleaner, and therefore this will even be less of an issue. Again, all this spill prevention, everything is taken care of. I'd like to know that for over 60 years, we've been operating power plants between ourselves and the U.S. Navy. Never have we had a fire involving fuel oil or anything like that. And of course, even major oil spills within the tanks or anything like that. So therefore, these are issues that certainly are taken care of. More importantly, because our employees are involved, we want to make sure they're protected. And secondly, of course, our environment outside of our area. Next. Is the plan safe for the community? I can say definitely yes. The efficient unit is burning much cleaner fuel. 30 acres of buffer around the 30-acre plan. So again, we're trying to be a good neighbor. Our footprint will be in the center of 30 acres, buffered by the remaining 30 acres around us. So that, again, we maximize. We're trying to be not apparent that we're there, or that we'll be a good neighbor by being a quiet one and not being visible. We can coexist with GRMC as it does in many other communities in the nation, especially since the power reliability needs of a hospital is critical to patient care. This power plant here really helps GRMC, not the opposite as I see it. No? Next. Here's a place, medical area total energy plan in Boston. 112 megawatt natural gas power plant. As you can see, all the yellow X's here are related to medical hospital or auxiliary medical facilities. Next. Here's a side view of the power plant, clear stack. What you see here is vapor. This is the vapor cooling, water cooling the machines, similar to what we're planning to do. Next. Here's a side view from apartment area down the street of the power plant, and it's stacked, and there's the cooling towers. Next. If we take a 60-acre footprint that we have in the property and put it on across this Mantac area, this is what it looks like. So we're not even cohabitating within this area. Everyone will be outside of the area, and GPA power plant will be right here in the center. So again, this is what we mean about the buffer being there for and being a good neighbor to the community. So again, here are all the different medical auxiliary, Boston Children's Hospital, the Brigham Medical, the Beth Dickinson Medical, again, many medical center and hospital right here in this area. And again, this is only one. We have many examples of similar situations. Next. Here's the footprint that we're talking about. Here's the 30-acre buffer within the 30-acre footprint within the 30-acre buffer. This one from this edge of this property to there is about 600 some feet to the edge of the GRMC boundary. Here's the substation. This is about 1,300 feet. It's about the same and all of that. So let's give a perspective as to, we're talking about even from the hospital to the closest asset. Here you're talking about over 1,000 feet. What is 1,000 feet? 1,000 feet is from here to the Superior Court. 1,000 feet is from here to the Paseo Stadium. It's from here to the police department. So it's not like we're just within elbow distance of each other. But I understand the concern and all of that, but I also would like to, give an idea as to perspective as to how close we are to adjacent to the GRMC. Next. The new power plant model, we will not be operating and maintaining this facility. You'll be an independent power producer similar to what we have done with MEC 8 and 9. You'll be a 25-year with an option for 5-year contract to bring it within the 30-year authorization by law. And that would allow this company to operate, maintain, and own this facility for the next 30 years. And at the end of the 30 years, turn the facility over to Guam Power Authority, who again, be it as it may, the policymakers at the time can recapitalize that plan and then bring it out again to another private entity for another 10, 20 years as necessary. So again, we wouldn't, the only thing that would be turned over to us would be the 115 kV line and the pipelines, things that we're very familiar on operating. But as far as the power plant, its facility, complying with regulations and all of that, it will be the independent power producer that will do that. Summary, Guam's new baseload plan will be safe, clean, reliable, and efficient. It will provide for quick typhoon recovery, be compatible with renewable energy. The current location will save ratepayers $80 million. It will lead to stable fuel costs and surcharges, eliminate tsunamis and storm surges, and meet future demand. So really, in a nutshell, all the concern, we can move forward without a new plan that would allow us to integrate renewable natural gas and ultra-low sulfur diesel. We'll continue to be the way we are. We're utilizing the plan that we have, and and being 20 to 40 years old, you're going to have to do something sooner or later. Most likely sooner, no? So again, thank you for, we ask for your support on Bill 223. The Greenwich benefits the island community at the lowest possible cost. Jesus Martin, open to answer any questions.
Thank you very much. Welcome, Vice Speaker, for joining us this evening. Do you have any questions yet, or okay? I do have a few questions. Of course, the main concern that the surrounding landowners or activities have is the emissions from the power plant, vibrations, and all that. Now, you showed a slide there of the Macheche plant on Harmon Loop Road. That one, and you indicated that. So, at one time, that particular plant, there was a lot of complaint that it was blowing down right into the schools, and the kids were getting sick. Was that at a time when it was burning residual fuel?
And that was the time when it was burning regular diesel. But this is now ultra-low sulfur diesel, which with the island over in, I think about 5 years ago, we converted to more expensive fuel, but cleaner fuel.
Okay, and there hasn't been any complaints since then?
We're not aware of any.
Okay. This land the acquisition of the 3 lots, which makes up the 60 acres, was that a mutual voluntary sale on the part of the landowners, or was there some taking involved?
It's a mutual agreement.
Mutual agreement.
Yes. So we have the property for buying, if you will, or subject to rezoning and subject to PUC approval, which we hope after,
Subject to rezoning and subject to what?
Public Utilities Commission approval.
Okay. Will there be fuel tanks on site within that 60 acres?
That's correct. You store enough fuel to last so many days so that if anything happens in the pipeline, you can continue service. But again, maximum protection will be provided not only for berms, but also detection and anything that, to prevent any kind of leakage.
And I presume that the fuel tanks will be compliant with the above storage tank regulations of the US EPA?
That's correct. We have so many regulations, including SPCC and all of that. Similarly, actually, similar to Macheche, similar to Deriru 1 and 2, all of those have fuel oil storage tanks within them. That again, we have strict compliance requirements to make sure that those are safe and don't have a leak.
Do you have an artist's rendition of what this plant might look like?
I think we may have it outside if we, I hope, I'm
Do
not
you
sure
have
that
one?
we
Do you have
brought
a
it.
digital slide?
But yes, we do have an artist rendition. But again, really the rendition is more to show that aesthetically the plan will be built not to look like a regular power plant, but really will be built with, it'll be in a building We'll make sure the place is really nice.
Understand,
We're
and that's
also
why I
gonna-
was asking for an artist rendition to
Yes,
to
we
get
do
a
have one.
visual idea.
Yeah. Then we will have a fence within a fence because, again, one of the concerns is terrorism and all of that. So this plan will really have all of those features that will allow us to do it because, again, we have the additional buffer.
You say there's an artist rendition outside. Can somebody maybe bring
Did
bring
we
one in?
bring it? Okay.
Oh, you're going to post it up there on the screen?
Senator, could I just add that the artist rendition is just a rendition. The final plants will depend on the kind of machines that are put in. They're all clean power plants, but they could be anything from what they call medium-speed diesels to combined cycle units. That's left up. We haven't determined that yet.
But it should. But the final outcome of the facility should look pretty close to the artist rendition.
Pretty
right?
close to the artist rendition
Yeah.
with the smokestacks and everything. But the inside components,
Understand?
Okay.
It's,
No, I just wanted
it's the
to point that out.
visuals from the external, so
Okay.
that when a patient from GRMC is looking out the window, you know, it's
Yep.
not going to be a visual assault.
That's correct, and it'll be on the bid specifications to make sure that's taken care of.
Okay. Maybe we can look at that. Are we about ready with that? Okay, we can look at that later. Vice Speaker, do you have any questions at this time?
Could you just clarify, Mr. Beneventi, the 80 million that you in several parts of the slides you said that it will save ratepayers 80 million, and this one you say on this selected location. So you gave us numbers for the gas savings, but how is it? How did you come up with the 80 million for this location versus just a new power plant anywhere?
Yeah, this is more the infrastructure, the capital investment. The ones I showed you savings earlier are just the fuel cost saving.
Right.
This is we by having the transmission line being only 1,000 feet away versus a mile and a half, that costs so much money, especially transmission lines. That we need like 3 towers to cross that. So when you take that, that's about 35 to 40 million of additional infrastructure costs. You take interest during construction for the 3 period because we're going to have to finance this, and then you take it over the 25-year period that you bond this or the IPP finance it. Then you're talking about a total of about 80 million costs. No?
Thank you.
All right. I don't have any more questions. I guess we're still waiting for the... Ready? Can you bring it up? Okay. So this is an artist's rendition of what the new facility would look like. And the green space around it is part of that 60-acre footprint?
Correct.
It is?
Correct.
Okay.
That footprint in the center is your 30 acres. Then the balance around it will be the additional 30 acres that we have.
Of green.
Yeah.
Basically green space.
Green stuff. Then we'll have the fence within the areas.
Okay. Okay, so I don't have any more questions from...
What is that clearing in the front? What is the clearing on the front right? Is that the hospital or is that
To
part
the
of
right?
the station?
Yeah, that's the.
This is a view from the GRMC.
Okay,
Yeah,
So
a
this
view
is
from the
the
hospital.
view from the top of the hospital.
okay.
Yeah, yep.
Now, I'd like to point out that from the street level, you're not going to see that. You're going to see mostly trees and other things that we're going to plant. So this is a view if you're up on the 5th floor, I believe, of GRMC.
The corner and looking down.
Okay. All right. At this time, if you don't have any more questions of the GPA panel, I'm going to go ahead and call up the Director of Land Management and Dr. John Jensen from University of Guam and the Water Energy Research Institute.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman and Ms. Vice Speaker. I'm Michael Borja, the Director of the Department of Land Management. On Bill number 223-34, which proposes to rezone 3 parcels of land that are nearly 59 acres big to M2 heavy industrial in the municipality of Dedido, which is currently zoned as R2 multi-family residential dwelling. That was defined by the Dos Amantes planning area, which was affirmed by the governor and the legislature in December 2009 and January 2011. The M2 heavy industrial zone, as defined, this designation is considered the least restrictive of all zones, which allows for uses permitted on all zoning designations with the optimum intensity such that residential uses are only permitted through an approved conditional permit. Title 21, Guam Code Annotated, Section 61310, prescribes the following allowable uses in an M2 heavy industrial zone. Any uses in an M1 zone except residential use, junkyards, under special provisions set forth in the subarticle 6 of and Article 5 of the Zoning Code. Number 3, any uses not specifically prohibited by law, including those which are or may be objectionable, obnoxious, or offensive by reason of odor, dust, smoke, noise, gas, fumes, cinders, vibration, or water carried waste. And 4, uses customarily accessory to any of the uses herein and in any accessory buildings and structures. Consequently, what an M2 zone does is because it is the least restrictive of all zoning designations, it permits the most offensive uses of the land. Therefore, authorizing an M2 zone should be permitted only with the greatest scrutiny in the name of protecting the public's health, safety, and welfare. In this matter, the subject lots are predominantly surrounded by M1 zone properties and with one M2 zone property adjacent to the south. Designating these 60 acres to M2 zone may provide justification for the surrounding lots to also convert to M2, creating a significant M2 sprawl. Public Law 28-134 created PF, or Public Facility Zones, designation which would allow the construction and operation of public facilities. It's a very basic definition in the law. The Northern District Wastewater Treatment Plant was recently designated PF zone. The PF zone has also been applied to properties in use or to be used by the Guam Power Authority for the expansion of the Talofofo electrical substation and construction of an energy storage system over there. And in the spirit of consistency in land uses of similar utility functions, this bill should change the zoning from R2 to PF, Public Facility Zone. We agree with the critical need of a more technologically efficient power system for the island. However, we do suggest the following. As I mentioned, the three identified lots in this bill should be rezoned from R2 to PF Public Facility Zone as a means to encourage consistency as presented in this report, and to require the Guam Power Authority to exceed current development standards and techniques for the construction and operation of a power plant as described in this bill. This requirement is to serve as a means to promote harmonious development and coexistence with surrounding properties, and to further encourage development opportunities without compromise. And finally, the land zone consideration report for this bill is forthcoming and will be available on February 23rd. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We'll open up for questions after Dr. Jensen's done. Dr. Jensen?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Vice Speaker. I've been asked to share my perspective regarding the potential risks of the proposed new power plant to the freshwater supply in our aquifer. I'll be brief because there are just a few points that need to be considered.
Please bring the mic closer to you.
Okay. First, the location of the plant is about a half a mile away from the nearest production wells, and it is downstream of the flow of groundwater to them. So any release of material at the surface would be a half a mile away and would be carried away from the wells rather than toward them. Second, new infrastructure is always safer than old infrastructure, and this plant is being designed and built in ways that minimize the prospects of fuel leaks or catastrophic releases, as we've just heard. Third, I have confidence in the people who manage and operate our utilities. I've worked with them regularly for 25 years and have seen their management and staff steadily gain people who are well-educated, highly trained, and conscientious about personal and industrial safety. And I'm pleased and proud to observe that they include many of our own UOG alumni and graduates from our graduate hydrology and undergraduate engineering programs. So I expect this plant, like the ones we have now, will continue to be well-managed and operated by trained, reliable people. And finally, to have a reliable water supply, we need reliable power supply, because without electrical power, you don't get the water out of the ground.
Thank you very much. I have a couple of questions. First of all, the suggestion that to rezone those 3 lots from to PF, public facility, as opposed to M2. I guess my understanding of public facility was more so facilities such as gyms, schools where people congregate. But then again, I guess it really doesn't matter what zoning we give to it. We could give it M2, we could give it M1, we could give it PF. And I say that simply because if we take a look at the history of the other power plants, like at Machechi, the one by the on Harmon Loop Road, I believe that zone, the property of that zone was agriculture. And it's still agriculture, but it was passed by law that allowing for the construction and operation of a power plant. The power plants down at Cabras were military installations and had no zoning to it, but with a proviso that to build and operate. I believe of the 9 facilities that GPA is operating, only 1 is rezoned to M2. So I guess my point is, we could call it a PF zone, we can call it an M1, or we can call it an M2, but maybe what's important is the language of the law that says this property will be rezoned to a certain zone for the sole purpose of allowing Guam Power Authority to build and operate a power plant. Does that sound...
Right. The language of the law can be anything you want it to be. Our concern is that as an M2 heavy industrial zone, with already M1 surrounding it, they're just one step away from saying, we want that too.
I get it.
And we don't want that sprawl. We want to really, really hold tight what is allowed to be M2. Earlier this afternoon, I showed you that there, from 1967, some properties in PD were zoned M2. It came to as a surprise to us as well, as we were looking and digging into the research for that particular bill. So that zoning is really, you know, the definition of what you're allowed to do there. While this particular use is just for a power plant, once you give it that zoning, it can be anything they want it to be. And while the owner of that property today says, I'm going to use it in this way, the owner of the property 20, 40 years from now, as an M2, can use it any way he wants as an M2. So we envision the harmonious relationship of all the surrounding properties in that area to include the medical facilities. And it was a good picture that they showed of the Boston area with the power plant right in the middle of a bunch of hospitals. But the issue is we just, you know, there's R2 hotel and commercial, and there's light industrial throughout that whole region that was created by the Dos Amantes planning area. And we just are afraid of what can happen when you allow an M2 sprawl. It will get out of hand, and it can be anything you want it to be.
Okay, and I appreciate the subtlety of, you know, keeping it more so compatible with the existing M1 that that dominates the surrounding that area.
Correct.
Okay, fine. Vice Speaker, did you have any?
What is the current use of the adjacent M2 property?
I believe that is where the power junction point is, where all the lines come together. It is a GPA site.
Is that the Harmon substation? Is that the same thing?
The M2
There's
lot?
a picture of it right in front. It was designated, it's actually, you know, the footprint of that site, its use is actually smaller than the lot itself, but it is a GPA use just to the south of it.
Joycetown.
And there it is in the, I think in the yellow.
GPA, do you know what that is? What is on that M2 property right now? The dark.
Can you speak into the mic? Can you speak into the mic?
Okay.
Now turn it on.
Test.
Oh, sorry.
Okay. Maybe I'll go over here. Yep, it's okay. We don't own that sliver of property, and I'm not sure who owns it. I'm not sure my team knows, but we only own the one with the Harmon substation on it. That's yes, this one here. That could have been part of the military property. I'm not sure the return but ours is, this is and then the right of way is there. So this is how we're going to come across with the thing.
And so do you know that the uses on the M1, are they currently being used as M1?
No, most of them are not.
They're
Most of
vacant?
them, some people have already been coming before the Land Use Commission for other different kinds of zoning variances, like heights and the stuff. But most of that is unoccupied right now. The Dos Amantes planning area, when it was created, it was just like a wish list of the property owners when they received the lands back on what they wanted it to be zoned as. And so there's a scattering of hotel, commercial M1s and R2s throughout that whole area with, I believe, just this one. There's another tiny little, which didn't make sense at all, tiny little M2 up in the Finagaisan area, right at the edge of the Dos Amantes planned area, and it's a water well station and a water pump station that was designated as M2. It won't show on this map, but the Dos Amantes is the farthest north area of Dos Amantes, basically.
Is that
right
an
along Route 3.
M2 on the top left corner?
I think it's an M1.
The blue cutout on the top left of the green?
You know, I don't
All right,
have the
do you
Dos
mind-
Amantes with me, but I can.
Okay, do you mind just giving us a list, at least of the map, this portion of it, which parts are being used, particularly the M1s and the M2, what they're being used as or plan to be used as?
We'll
if you know?
provide a
Yeah.
listing for you.
All right, and I just wanted to ask Dr. Jensen, I know you're from where you are our aquifer expert, and so you talk about that. So this plant is going to be half a mile away from the production wells, so the downstream will go away rather than toward the wells. But you didn't talk about will the groundwater or the release of materials at the surface, does it endanger the aquifer? Because, I mean, doesn't it also just go down? Not just, or are they building, why do you haven't, I guess, you talked about the risk to the wells being very low, but what about the risk to the permeating down to the aquifer? Is there any risk of, because otherwise I'm thinking, why are we preventing M1 and M2 over the aquifer? I mean, why is that frowned upon if there's no risk? So I I don't know, could you just
Right,
please speak
right.
more about that?
Right. Well, if there was a substantial release and material percolated down through the limestone to the freshwater lens, this portion of the lens is on its way to the coast, and the production wells are upstream from it. And in the downstream portion, it's close enough to the coast that the lens is thin enough that that's not going to be an area that is a prospect for future development. So if material got down there, it wouldn't get into the drinking water. It wouldn't get into the part of the freshwater lens that is being tapped for drinking water, either now or in the future.
Sorry, when you say there's no potential in that area for development, you mean development as a well? They're not going to
Right.
draw from that area where this groundwater might sink
Right,
down into?
Right. Yeah. When I say development, I'm talking about aquifer development.
Okay,
Yeah.
so what types of release of material, what type of material are we at risk of?
I'm thinking of fuel. but,
Okay,
you know,
and
I mean, that's the only material that is a potential threat to any kind of environmental contamination, something that's a liquid that gets loose on the ground and percolates into the ground. So those are the kind of things that, in general, you worry about. But in this case, like say, the chance of release in the first place is very minimal, as Mr. Benavente explained how this is a state-of-the-art plant that is designed so that those kind of things don't happen. Like I say, it's going to be run by very competent and trained personnel, so
I'm just concerned that, I mean, every M1 and M2 applicant, I think, would come in and tell us the same thing, that they're very competent and they're going to run it without any accidents and they're not going to, that we have no risk. But I think I don't know, it was my understanding that that is the reason why we are very, very cautious about granting any other types of zoning over the aquifer because of this, because M1, and so I appreciate the director's concerns that we're rezoning this to M2, the most risky of all types of use over an aquifer, I would think. And yeah, so we're not just granting, this one power plant, that's why Senator Atta's suggestion actually is maybe a good one. But we're actually rezoning an area and we're setting a precedent for the entire area for the next applicant who's going to come in and say, if it was safe for this GPA to, rezone to M2 over the aquifer, is it safe for me to rezone to M2 over the aquifer? And that's what I guess if there's a map you could draw for us that shows us maybe, the aquifer that is not at risk in this area, or I don't know, just something that would allay those types of concerns, because I am concerned, and we are setting a precedent, and we're not going to be able to draw that line where the M2 adjacent, if creating an M2 adjacent to this is not safe versus this is safe.
yeah, I guess I should have brought my map, but I'd be happy to bring it by your office and explain to you the dynamics of the aquifer. But basically, the entire northern half of Guam, from the Pago Guadalupe Fault up to Retidian and Patty Point, is the aquifer. But not every part of the aquifer is, contains a significant amount, enough water to be useful. And so those parts of the aquifer where the lens is thick enough and fresh enough, those are the parts of the aquifer that we have to conserve. The periphery of the aquifer is not a zone where you would be developing future water supply.
All right, and
and-
so you're saying those are separated from the other zones in the aquifer?
Yes.
So that if they get contaminated, we're kind of containing our contamination to the one portion
Well,
of the aquifer?
It's not going into an area that contains water that we would use, either because
Well,
the
if you-
amount or quality of the water.
All right. Well, if you could give something, either in writing or a map or something that to the committee chair that he could include in the report, I'm sure the rest of my colleagues would also be curious about that.
Be happy to provide that.
All right, thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
I just have one question, which, first of all, to Mr. Benavente, you indicated the primary source of water for the power plant for cooling will come from the wastewater treatment plant, right?
That's correct.
Now, are there any plans that there's that possibility of a failure from this water source that you're going to have to tap into the aquifer?
Of course, you have a redundant source of water. So you will be tapping because you're going to need potable water anyway, right? For the
And how much water is anticipated to be used?
It's like 3 million gallons a day.
Okay.
But I like to also note that with the retirement of Cabers 1, 2, 3, and 4, that's over, we're going to be using less water. We're actually going to save more water with their retirement than what we're going to use in this power plant.
But I thought you said you were using seawater.
No, with the, we're going to use fresh sewer water, which is fresh water here.
No.
Yeah.
Down at Cabras, you're
No, we-
saying that when the 4 plants are shut down, the savings from that kind of offsets what might possibly be needed.
In the Cabras 1 and 2 is a steam boiler, which uses a lot of water to make steam
Right.
to generate. So we will no longer be utilizing that water, which actually comes today from the aquifer. In other words,
Where's your water source at Cabras? Is it from the ocean or fresh water?
2 sources. It's coming fresh water for the boiler to make steam to run the turbine. And then at the end of the turbine, the low pressure goes to a condenser.
Okay.
And you use seawater. I'm sorry. You
okay,
use seawater to cool that down. So you have 2 sources of water.
Okay, I guess my concern is in the event of a failure from the primary water source
Correct.
for the new power plant, you would have to draw water from the aquifer
Correct.
up north, right?
Correct.
Has this been bounced off wary to see whether that 3 million gallon draw is going to be of any significance?
We can talk about it more with Weary, but again, the net benefit of this project really is that we'll use less water from the aquifer than we do today. And then secondly, in addition to, when you do have some issues with the treatment, you will have some storage, a storage tank on site to provide you some water in case anything happens within the system until you can get back on your feet. So,
Are you going to have any backup systems that would allow you to draw water from the aquifer for the new plant?
you always need a backup system, but again, do we ever use it? I doubt it. But you always have to be prepared
I understand.
for the worst, so that we can continue to generate power. So you could be tied in to the main pipeline to GWA, but as far as we're drawing from it, we doubt that we ever have to,
Okay.
because we're going to not only treat it, but we're going to store volumes, just like with any of the power plants. You store a certain amount of volume that will last you so long in case anything in the transmission stream anything incident occurs.
Okay. All right. Yeah, sure.
So, Mr. Benavente, the gray water that you're going to be using in the new plant, that comes from the sewer treatment plant, and it's like run through already, so it's
Yeah, that's
clean.
correct.
But- okay. So after it's used to cool, it's going to be used as a cooling system.
Right.
Then that goes. Is there anything added to it when it leaves?
Actually, when you treat it to gray water, it becomes non-potable, meaning you can't drink it. However, non-potable water can be used for irrigation, golf course, everything like that.
Right.
So therefore, it really is not a danger to to the environment. But also, we'll have a pipeline that goes back and forth
To where?
to the wastewater treatment.
Oh, so when you're done with the gray water, it's going to go
Yeah,
back to
it
the
could go
sewage
back,
treatment plant? Okay.
Because the plant itself, right now, the northern wastewater treatment, I believe it's at about 5 to 6 million gallons per day. And then with the build-up and everything, it's going to increase. So we'll always have adequate water from there, as long as our treatment facilities are redundant. And we'll make sure that they are redundant so that we can always get that water from there.
So there's there's nothing that's coming out of the plant that will be added into that water when it goes back?
No, no.
That the treatment
No.
plant would then have to deal with
No,
in addition
not-
to
not at all.
regular? Okay, all right.
Now, the wastewater treatment, your system is only going to be as strong as your weakest link. Now, that's a pretty old treatment plant. Is that being upgraded?
That's correct.
Senator, can I answer that?
As part of the military build-up?
Yeah. Can I answer that on
Sure.
behalf of GWA? GWA is in the process of upgrading the northern wastewater treatment from advanced primary permit requirements to secondary treatment. And in talking with the general manager of GWA, he's assured me that as we work on this project together with GPA, that they're going to build in systems to take care of adequately recapturing the cooling water, integrating it, and then disposing of it as they would dispose of all the other water.
Okay.
So we're going to comply. He's worked with us out with US EPA, so we're going to comply with all the requirements of US EPA.
And how much of an upgrade is being put into the treatment plant?
It's about in the neighborhood of $134 million that we're spending up there.
And where's
to
that
upgrade.
coming from?
The money's coming from the Department of Defense as part of the buildup.
Okay, thank you. All right, do you have any more questions of this panel? All right, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Mr. Benavente, maybe you should just kind of stay there in case. All right. Next, I want to call up Mr. Linzangen. Mr. Plinsky, representing GRMC. Mr. Uggan, Ray Uggan. And Mr. J. I want to say your contact address is 158 East Nandez Avenue. That's you? Okay. Okay, so I'm going to start with Mr. Linzangen, and go ahead.
Good evening, Senator Ada, Senator Terlaje, and I would like to thank Mr. Benavente for his long service to the community and all the CCU members, together with the GPA workers. Well, my position here is I disagree with placing the plant in that area. First of all, I would like to ask or state that in regards to 150 million penalty, if we are not in compliance with the US EPA, I would like to know when is the time frame to fix that. And then second, the $80 million that will be saved for Ucodu location. How about on the other 3 locations? Because there are also 3 locations that was mentioned, the Northern, Tangison, and Cabras Piti. it was not specified here how many million we will save in case we will go to the other location, in case it will be built to the other location. So we need to know the comparison in terms of savings, because they only specify the savings on the Okudo location. Now, in regarding to his presentation, this is a very nice presentation regarding the MATEP Medical Area Total Energy Plant in Boston, which he specified a good neighbor. And it is contrary to that, because in June 2004, 2003, there was a report by Claire Pasternak of the Harvard Crimson. It is titled Total Energy to Total Disaster. Because at the beginning of the 1978, Harvard found itself locked in a battle with area residents and government officials over its most expensive and ambitious construction project ever, the Medical Area Total Energy Plant, or MATEP. And I would like to state some of the highlights only because it could take me 20 minutes. And MATEP planners had not anticipated that its Boston and Brookline neighbors would voice such vehement opposition to the project. The residents were chiefly concerned that the project was environmentally harmful. By 1977, Harvard entered hearings with the state DEQE, and in 1978, the university received a ruling that the plant would be too environmentally harmful to be built. In the summer of 1980, the case came up for reconsideration, with the protesters remaining adamantly opposed to the plant construction. Well, when the DEQ called a meeting at the State House with Harvard's lawyers to schedule a hearing so the case could be reconsidered, about 15 Brookline and Boston residents barricaded the meeting room doors in protest. After Capitol Police were summoned and the meeting canceled, it was held by telephone, with Harvard threatening to take the government agency to court if its permit was denied. To cut the story short, Harvard, they won their appeal, and the neighbors was so angry that they called them the dirty neighbor. And the reason why they said it was, it got a favorable ruling because Harvard began construction of MATEP and bought the diesel generators before it had been granted governmental permission. It made it politically impossible to deny the plant its permit. They used their economic and political muscle to push the project through by beginning to construct the plant without a permit and by putting up a stock which was enormously expensive. They also purchased the diesel generators before they were licensed to construct and operate the plant. What this did for them was ensure that this plant would be built. He says the situation suffered from a lack of equity between the two sides. If there had been a level playing field, if the community had the kind of political and economic power that Harvard had, I think, this is the comment by the Brookline lawyer Daniel Parton, the community had the kind of political and economic power that Harvard had, I think the rational decision would have been to deny the project. So, Mr. Senator, there's a lot of opposition from the neighbors of the MATEP, contrary to their presentation that it was a good neighbor. In fact, they even called it like they are sick as the Nazi. You know, when Harvard fired their first plant. That's why I think the CCU should thoroughly study the location of this power plant and also study the effect or the impact on the public interest on rates.
Okay, I'm going to give you a couple more minutes.
Yes, Mr. Senator.
I'm going to give you a couple more minutes.
No,
You have to wrap it up.
That's all I would have to say is to study some more the location, because that's my main concern, because it's close to the mall, to the hospital, and close to Marine Drive, and we are a tourist destination. You know, that's our major industry, and I'm sure there will be some noise that could be here in the Marine Drive, and it's not a good location. That's my main thing.
Okay, thank you very much. You did have 3 questions. What's GPA's timeline to comply? Otherwise face that $150 million penalty. Savings at other locations, probably really more so a question of feasibility. And then basically you posed a question about the MATEP, and I'll ask them. But I'm not going to ask them to respond now because I don't want to get into a debate with that. But that is probably something you can take a note of and maybe respond to it. Mr. Plinsky?
Senator Rada, Senator Terlahi, thank you very much for the opportunity. Thank you, GPA, and the fine people that work at GPA. Guam Regional Medical City is very supportive of GPA building an additional power plant in the north, even in Dedido. It's just the one fact that it's right next to our hospital is the key consideration that we feel is detrimental to our people, but more our employees, but more so our patients. And I will highlight our testimony, but I have one additional item to submit, which I'd like to highlight. The testimony from our President and Chief Operating Officer, Dr. Mike Cruz, highlights that GRMC is the landowner of approximately 7.3 acres containing, I forget the lot numbers, but these are our subject properties. GRMC is a 136-bed specialty care hospital that has a central utility plant and various parking lots located on these subject properties. We also have a phase 2 plan to build a second hospital building on the subject properties. I would ask, if possible, the GPA, like the gentleman was before me, is just a great presentation. I know they had a picture, a presentation that might highlight while I'm speaking the view from GRMC to that facility. Is that possible to bring that back up on the screen?
Yeah.
While I go on? Okay. So the second building would be even closer to that. Where you were looking at parking lots, that is the property where the second tower of our hospital rooms would go, even closer to the facility. And GRMC currently employs approximately 800 employees, and the number is expected to grow as we continue to launch more specialty services and consider the construction of the second tower. One example of new specialty services is the open heart surgery program, which we plan to relaunch this June with Dr. Concepcion. So that will be some of the sickest patients in Guam that would be coming in for open heart surgeries. In front of GRMC are 3 separate lots totaling approximately 8 acres that are owned by Mr. Caesar Cabot. These properties will soon be home to the Laddie Medical Complex, which will contain 6 buildings, of which some are already under construction. The services at GRMC and the Laddie Medical Complex will complement each other, and the combined campus will soon be recognized as the center of healthcare for the entire region. The proposed site for the new GPA Northern Power Generation Plant would be located within 500 to 1,000 feet of the most sophisticated medical campus in the Western Pacific. Although it may make sense for GPA to locate a power plant next to its distribution facility on Marine Corps Drive in Dedido, it does not make sense to construct the plant so close to major healthcare facilities and high-traffic commercial establishments such as the Micronesian Mall. The proposed power plant may pose unknown health and safety risks to the people of these medical and retail facilities, including but not limited to: 1, electromagnetic fields may cause harm to people, particularly the young and the old, and those with weak immune systems or cardiac ailments For example, those with pacemakers or AICD devices that regulate and restart the heart. Emissions, power plants that burn fossil fuels such as petroleum and natural gas are known to produce harmful emissions that result from the combustion of these fuels, including carbon dioxide, carbon monoxide, sulfur dioxide, nitrogen oxides, and particulate matter, as well as heavy metals such as mercury. Terrorism, power plants have been identified as primary targets for terrorists. Guam is already at a heightened risk for terroristic activity due to the military buildup and recent direct threats from North Korea. A power plant located next to a hospital and major shopping mall would be an even more attractive terrorist target. Visual landscape, GRMC provides a tranquil, healing environment, including large windows in every room to allow for sunlight to boost the mood of our patients and their family members and help people feel calm. A large industrial power plant in direct view from patient rooms is not conducive to our calm, healing environment. And finally, risk to GRMC backup power. If a catastrophic event were to take place at the GPA power plant, such as a fire or an explosion, it would likely prevent GRMC from using its backup power facility due to the risk of an additional explosion occurring as a result of the GPA power plant being located too close to GRMC's central utility plant, which is actually even closer to the proposed site. Our power plant is right to the back of the property. This would put patient lives at risk. For these reasons, GRMC cannot support Bill 223-34. Now, in supplement to the testimony, it's ironic that the gentleman before me mentioned the tension in Harvard and Boston, Massachusetts, when they built a power plant next to a hospital facility. They've taken a lot of guff for this over a long period of time, so they actually, believe it or not, have done their own study through the Harvard School of Public Health, a lengthy study over a 10-year plus period studying the entire nation, particularly seniors, studying the Medicare population, which is age 65 and above, to see if an increase in pollution or particulate matter in the air, even at very low levels, has any significant impact on, in this case, the senior population. If I could, while I mention this, there was a slide number 16 in the GPA PowerPoint slides, if they could bring that up. And it had, yeah, this is like a foreign language to me, but I saw some numbers that I think will be worth noting. This study is titled, and it was just released, December of 2017. Okay, this study is titled The Short-Term Exposure to Low Levels of Air Pollution Linked with Premature Death Among U.S. Seniors. Short-term exposures to fine particulate matter, air pollution, and ozone, even at levels well below current national safety standards, which are the EPA, were linked to higher risk of premature death among the elderly in the U.S., according to this new study from the Harvard T.H. Chan School of Public Health. I'm just highlighting some key things. The study was published December 26, 2017 in the world-renowned Journal of the American Medical Association. This is the most comprehensive study of short-term exposure to pollution and mortality to date. Quote, we found that the mortality rate increases almost linearly as air pollution increases. Any level of air pollution, no matter how low, is harmful to human health. Studies have shown that fine inhalable particulates, PM, and ozone, particularly in warm weather or warm seasons, are linked with increased mortality rates. Micrograms, 93% of the zip codes in the United States were studied over a 13-year period in this study. And what they found, and I have a question, on this chart here, under the proposed power plant, there's a final row called particulate matter, and it says 3.54 micrograms per cubic meter of particulate matter in the air. Do we know what the current, before the power plant, what I would assume it's less than 1.5 currently around that area? Do we have the current pollution per microgram per cubic meter in the Dededo next to our hospital right now, if this is what it's proposed at 3.54 when the plant is operating?
No, that's the estimate based on all the emission controls that the power plant is going to have. And that's the modeling that was done. And actually, they modeled the whole area to show that the pollution
Okay,
levels
I don't want to
are
get
less.
into
Oh,
a
we can't
debate,
go in-
so
okay.
just present your
Okay, the
questions
point,
and-
sir, is that this study found an increase of just 1 microgram per cubic meter. In this case, it's showing 3.54 over the course of just a summer in the United States would lead to 550 extra deaths per year, and these are of seniors healthy, amongst the healthy and the ill. Our folks are the sickest of the sick, and as you know, our population is far sicker than the average United States senior or as a whole. So if that was to go, let's say it's currently a half of a microgram per cubic meter, and it jumps to 3.54, if these estimates are even correct, that's not just 1 microgram, that's over 3.5 more micrograms. The impact on the sickest folks of the island that are at our hospital could, and they're saying as short as just a very short period of time of exposure, and that's including the healthy population. So if you take the sickest seniors, put them right next to the plant, and you have this is, the latest study, even done by the very facility that this gentleman just said took so much heat, that same institution has now found that this is detrimental to the health, particularly of the oldest folks in our country. So I think this is some of the case that we're trying to say. We absolutely know that there's a need for another power plant. We know it should go in the north. Everything they're presenting, they've done a great job. It's right next to us. We feel that's too much risk. Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. And I'm sure GPA has taken note of that, and they'll have an opportunity to respond. Mr. I've got, I'll take this gentleman right here.
All right, thank you, Senator. And thanks for everyone that came before me. It was very informative. And I feel so small here, but I'll tell you right now, I'm one of the landowners of Lot 533.
Okay, identify yourself, please.
I'm sorry? Oh, I'm
Yeah.
sorry. Martin Leon Guerrero.
Martin, okay.
Yeah.
All right. I know a Martin Leon
Yeah,
Guerrero, and I was looking
There's
for
quite a few of us.
different Martin Leon Guerrero. Okay, sorry.
So I'm against the power plant because I'm right up against it. And for me, my mother deeded me this land. My cousin, he was the administrator for this land. This whole area was taken by the military.
And
this,
you are
right?
what's your
I
lot
am one
number?
of the owners of Lot 5033. And
Okay.
my land is right adjacent to 5010. All right. So I'm right up against them.
Okay.
I own about 2 acres. My cousin here is right next door to me. He owns about the same amount. We were never notified about this. I saw it in the paper, and I came here. I don't want to live next to a power plant. I've got plans for my land and for my children, and I don't want to live next to a power plant. And for all these reasons, for the wastewater and the groundwater and all these other people that have said these things, it even really emphasizes even more that I don't want to live next to a power plant. And I see 3 lots that are for sale, but on my map here, I'm counting 11 other landowners around there, and I'm wondering if the representatives of those 11 lots are here, and how do they feel about a power plant right next to them? And I'm pretty sure no one wants to live next to a power plant or develop anywhere near a plant. I understand that we need a power plant, that's great, but I am against it.
Okay. Thank you very much, Mr. Leon Guerrero. And I do, one of the nice things about having this legislative process, of course, is after the hearing, you certainly have access to 14 other senators, and you should take the time to visit them and share your concerns with them, and that may influence how they vote on the bill, whether to pass the bill or not. And so that's the beauty of the process that we're going through now. Okay?
Thank you.
All right. Mr. Uggan?
Thank you, Chairman. Vice Speaker Talai, good evening. Thank you for your time. My name is Ray Uggan, and I am here to voice my support of Bill 22334 to rezone Lot 5010-1-U and 5042-1 and 5042-R1. I am a descendant of the original landowner of these lots, the late Maria Quintanilla Beneventi, my great-grandmother. One of her daughters, my grandmother, the late Ana Beneventi Aflui, became family administrator when these lots were returned by the military. Upon my grandmother's passing in 2001, my mother, Francisca Dueñas Uggan, took over as administrator until her passing. I am now the administrator for the family with regards to these 3 lots. I represent a majority of the surviving landowners and their heirs, and would like to express to you their support for this bill as well. During my research, I found that according to Land Management's records, our properties were zoned R2 multifamily. When I viewed the map for our area, I found that a majority of the land parcels surrounding our lots were zoned M1. I asked the land management employee at that time helping me, how was this decided and why were we zoned R2? Senator, our lots are adjacent to approximately 17 other parcels, and of those lots, 64% are zoned M1. The employee informed me that when the land was given back to the original landowners, land management gave families 2 years to decide what they wanted to do with their lots, what they wanted it zoned as. I believe my grandmother wasn't given notice or really actually understood that she had the ability to change that, and grandma just probably kept it at R2. It was then that I realized that she may have wanted her children or grandchildren to make use of the properties and build on it and maybe farm the land the way that she raised her family. Senators, my grandmother was a simple woman. She farmed and raised animals for her income, and that was the only way she supported her family, selling fruits, vegetables, and livestock. Unfortunately, we, her children and grandchildren, weren't following in her footsteps. And realizing this years later, she told my mother to just sell the property and divide it amongst her family. My mother passed away in 2012, and I took over as the administrator where she left off. I'd also like to add that during our check with Land Management's GIS system, our property was being assessed or being labeled as an M1 or an M lot, and also Revenue Taxes system picked it up, and we were being assessed as M1 property taxes, which is significantly higher than R2. Today, this land is earmarked for the Guam Power Authority's new power plant. My family and I asked this legislature to pass the bill and rezone our properties to M2, similar to the surrounding lots, which may allow GPA to build a power plant on our property to benefit the entire island. Again, thank you for your time. Suzus Masi.
Thank you, Mr. Uggan. Sir?
Thank you, Senator Ada, Senator Talai. My name is Jake Nata. Like my cousin here, we own property 5033. Never got any notice until yesterday to come here. Great presentation. Yes, we do need a power plant to support our future needs and future kids. But like Senator Talai said, the water lens is very important for our kids. No one can predict what can happen if there is any significant damage to the property of the new power plant. I'm against this 110% because, like what my cousin said, who would want to sell the property next to a power plant? The value will go low. Just like this little water here, this paper represents the limestone. When you make a damage, the limestone is like a sponge. It absorbs everything and spreads it out. No one can control the water lens. The water lens are all connected one way or another. Once you contaminate the water lens, we cannot fix it. We cannot overturn it. It's one of our natural resources to provide water to our kids in the future. Just recently, Airport Authority, the water wells there got contaminated. Millions and millions of dollars went there to try to fix it. Are we going to go to that same mistake? Should we suffer our future kids with those water lines? We have already 2 locations where the power plants are at. They're not working right now. They're damaged or destroyed, but they already got the foundation there. Why can't we just use that money to rebuild that foundation to support what they're looking for? Of course, we're talking about using the wastewater. Is there any study of what happens to the non-potable water while we use as steam? Where's it going to go? And again, Senator Addo, you talked about what if there's a natural disaster? Again, we've got to tap into our natural resources, the waterlands, the wells. Of course, we've got to build a foundation for the materials needed, such as the fuel. What happens if that fuel tank cracks? Just recently, we had a water tank that was in the Macheche area where it collapsed because there's non-maintenance on that water well. The tank, it collapsed and it damaged other houses. Okay, what if that tank somehow leaks? No one detects it, and the fuel goes into the waterlands. Okay, we're damaged already. It could take millions and millions of dollars to fix it. The limestone is all of northern part of Guam. It is a sponge, and we all know it. It filters out everything that goes down. It doesn't go out to the ocean, it goes down. And we should know that the waterlands is all a bed of water held by limestone. If I'm wrong, then show me that it's not held by limestone, because limestone is just a filter. It filters out whatever goes down in the water. So risking us having a power plant right next to a half a mile water well, it's a big risk, and the risk is in your hands if you vote yes to this bill. I would not vote for it. I would reconstruct the existing power plant that's been damaged to what we're looking at to put on Daddy lot. If you guys are going to go to that fields, he has presented a map of all these pipelines of all the fuels. Any little earthquake, natural gases, anything along the natural gas pipeline, it's going to go up in fumes, it's going to blow up. We have people right now vandalizing Guam, period. What happens if they vandalize the pipe mistakenly? Cause a natural disaster and makes a ripple effects. And natural gas, we won't be controlled overnight. It will take a long time. We see it in CNN, we see it in the United States of how all these natural gases have been affected a lot of the houses by leveling out the houses, burning them down. Then we also have fuel lines that will be leaking. And right now, Guam is very bad in maintaining a lot of infrastructure. So how are we going to suffer from this if you do vote on this bill? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kanata. All right, we're finished with this panel. Do you have any questions of them?
Do any of you know what that Triangle M2 property, who owns it? Next to your property, I guess, Mr. Uggan?
I have no clue who owns it, ma'am.
The triangle?
Yes.
That's my property.
That's yours? But that one's zone M2?
No, it's not.
Okay. So the other question is, you've been told by land management that your property is already zoned M1?
No, ma'am. What's showing up in their system, the GIS system is showing that it's M, it's designated as M, which is M1. And also Revenue Tax is picking up that same system and charging us for M1 zone taxes, which is higher than the R2 designation.
But someone is telling you then that your property is not zoned M1?
No, I'm just saying that when we did our research, we found that on land management system, it shows as an M zone, and Revenue Tax is also picking it up as an M zone and charging us for the taxes for that zone.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Okay, I hope GPA took note of that and will respond to that. Okay. All right, thank you very much. I've got two more, and then we'll close out with GPA. Mr. Reno Manzano and Ms. Kerr. Okay, go ahead and proceed, Mr. Manzano. Please identify yourself for the record.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, Ms. Vice Speaker. Good evening. Good evening, everyone. My name is Rino Manzano. I'm the General Manager of Marianas Energy Company, the remaining independent power producer here in Guam. We own, manage, and operate the PT-89 in the south. And we've been here for the past 20 years helping the Guam community with safe, efficient power that we can supply to the Guam community. Now, I'm here to support the rezoning. Being an energy player for not only here in Guam, we've developed a lot of projects in there. In fact, we also own a power plant nearby hospitals in Japan. And what Mr. Benavente basically explained in as far as the state-of-the-art new technologies in there are basically true. I would actually, there was a rendering that was presented by GPA, but I would like to share to everyone is essentially an actual new state-of-the-art technology, which is what we would like to do in Guam. If we are interested about helping Guam in there for the 180 megawatts, and we are actually doing the modeling right now. Now, in Germany, they have a 600 megawatts combined cycle already operating in there since 2 years ago, which would more than likely be the same for Guam, considering that the gas and ULSF would be used. So, if I may, Mr. Chairman, I could give a copy to you and to Ms. Vice Speaker in there. I also have the write-up of this power plant. As, if I may, this is, okay, so this is centrally located in a very busy place. This is actually a tourist destination in Germany, Dusseldorf. And as you can see here, this is a very state-of-the-art technology. Actual, it's not a render. It's actually operating for the past 2 years. It was completed 2 years ago. And it actually won the best power plant in 2016 because it's very safe, environmental friendly, and it addresses the requirements of this community, which is very similar to what we need here in Guam, right? So what I'm just saying is what GPA is doing right now, actually, it has a strong basis. It would work here in Guam. It would work the Guam community. We have the same situation. This is also a tourism industry place. It's, so we can build this kind of similar power plant here in Guam. I understand the concerns about, hey, it's located nearby the hospital, the mall. As you can see here, it's located essentially even in the tourist destinations of Dusseldorf. But we can build it in a way to make sure that even the noise, there's no noise coming out in this kind of technology. The oil spill, all those other things. For us here in Guam, we've been doing that, right? We've been operating our power plant for the past 20 years. We always do inspections in their safety, and the community and the environment is our focus in there. We would like to make sure when we build, own, operate, and maintain power projects, especially here in Guam, we would make sure that we are responsible, we are professional companies. All of my employees are duly accredited in there. We go through a lot of training in there. So we do a lot we've never had any incidences for the past 20 years on anything whatsoever. Safety is very important. Working with the environment, trying to make sure we produce clean, efficient power is what we would like to also do. I know there's a lot of interest about the new power plant in there, but for us, what we would just like to say is what GPA is thinking about is actually very doable. And there's a lot of companies like us who has done this thing before, and we are very, very sensitive to the requirements of the community, making sure that, hey, we built it for you, we manage it for you, we operate it for you without any problems, and making sure that we take care of the Guam community in there, especially the neighboring areas in there, that there's no complaint, that everyone would be happy. Thank you, sir.
All right, thank you very much, Mr. Manzano. Ms. Kerr?
Thank you. I'm Joni Kerr, and I'm representing kind of unofficially owners of the following lots: 5040-15 and 5040-16. One of the administrator for these lots is my mother, Jovita Kanga, and she and her siblings, Pedro Esteban, Margarita Camacho, and Lagrimas Beneventi, all disagree with having the power plant located near their land. They were, like the previous people who gave testimony here, I didn't catch their names, Leon Guerrero, this land was taken by the military and then given back to them maybe a decade or so ago. I went to the Tamuning meeting, the one at the Tamuning Senior Center, and listened to the GPA presentation. And one of the requests that we asked of GPA was to see if they could find out what the effect of the property values would be on installing the power plant in that neighborhood. And I'm hoping that they can provide an answer for that. They said that they would look into it. And I did a little bit of research. I only just found out or was reminded about the hearing last night, so I couldn't really do so much research. But there is a paper by L.W. Davis written in 2010. The title of the paper is The Effect of Power Plants on Local Housing Values. And one of the parts of the paper says that neighborhoods within 2 miles of plants experience a 3 to 7% decrease in housing values and rents. And then larger increases were seen for properties within 1 mile and for plants of a larger size. So the larger the plant, the lower the more the property value dropped. And the closer you are to the plant, the lower your property value dropped. So that was L.W. Davis' paper written in 2010. So that's a concern of my mom and my aunt and uncle, what that will do to their property value in terms of future development, sales, and whatnot. So they're located very close to the power plant. They received a letter from GPA. The other thing that I noticed, there was a chart that was, my concern is also environmental, but there was a chart that GPA had of the emissions, the concentrations of emissions, projected concentration of emissions, and then comparing them to others. Yeah, okay, so that's emissions. It says nitrous oxide, or nitrogen oxides, sulfur dioxides, carbon monoxides, and then particulate matter. What I'm wondering about, and in the same paper by Davis, he noted that plants have a lot of externalities. They give off so the emissions go up in the air and so on. But I'm wondering what the data are for the proposed plant with respect to heavier metals, such as lead, arsenic, selenium, mercury, and cadmium. These are things that are heavier. So I'm wondering if, well, in their presentation, they said that their stack is going to send the emissions so high up into the atmosphere. The prevailing winds are going to blow it so far away, we wouldn't notice it. We wouldn't notice there were any untoward colors in the emissions, and so on. It'd be pretty clean air, that's what they say. But I'm wondering about these heavier particulates, and I don't know if particulates covers, that particulate matter in that last row, if that covers these heavy metals. So my concern would be that perhaps some of these heavy metals might find their way filtering down toward the ground, possibly getting into the aquifer, possibly getting into Tumon Bay. Okay, so the other thing that they said in the presentation was that the emissions would be carried so far up into the atmosphere and then be carried away by prevailing winds. That's supposing that the atmospheric pressure stays fairly constant. Under high atmospheric pressure, and maybe most of the year we have high atmospheric pressure, that might be okay, but what about times when we have higher than average, higher than normal atmospheric pressure? In other words, colder temperatures like we experience here in the, in our winter months. So colder temperatures, we have higher atmospheric pressure. So would that higher atmospheric pressure cause the emissions to be closer to the ground, closer to the surface, rather than, being carried away by the winds? I think that's all I've got right now.
Fine,
Yeah.
thank you. And just so that you're aware, I'm not taking notes, but it's being recorded, and these are questions that will be compiled, and maybe not tonight, but GPA will somehow try to address those in the committee report. Okay?
All right.
Thank you very
Thank
much.
you.
I'm sorry. Do you have-
Could you just tell us where your property is located on the map? Can we get that zoning map?
Can you
I'm
show
not
that?
really sure
Oh,
exactly.
what about do you know the zone?
I'm not really sure.
Okay, just curious.
Yeah.
Anyways, I'm going to ask the Department of Land Management to give us a list of all the adjacent landowners and find out why they weren't notified, and also the uses of the current uses of those properties. All right, thank you.
All right, thank you very much, Ms. Kerr. Finally, Mr. Sanchez, you did sign up.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman and Vice Speaker Terlahi, for allowing the Guam Power Authority.
Hold on a second.
Sorry.
What was that? Oh, he's on the CCU. Okay, sorry, go ahead.
Thank you, Chairman Atta and Vice Speaker Terlahi, for allowing GPA, the CCU, to present not just to you, but to the entire community tonight. A very important issue. You can tell from the community involvement already, there's a lot of questions and concerns, valid as they are. And
may I just stop you for a minute, please?
Yes, sir.
So I know who you are, but identify yourself for the record.
I'm sorry.
Are you testifying as a CCU member or as a public at large?
Both, really.
Both.
I
Okay,
mean,
fine.
I'm not going to deny that I'm a member of the
Okay, sure.
CCU. Yeah,
Sure.
So,
Okay.
So, I'm very grateful that the CCU and GPA spent a lot of time in prior weeks reaching out to the different sectors of the community. I think it's allowed landowners and neighbors to come in and ask some very important questions, and tonight's hearing is an attempt to address those concerns as best as we can, and then to give guidance to the legislature as to whether they should allow this project to go through by rezoning this area. And so it's democracy in action, and I appreciate that it culminates in this effort tonight. I wanted to just perhaps, before I touch base on a few things that came up in the Q&A and then close, I think the conversation between Mr. Borja and the two of you on the right zoning designation is, I think there's a valid discussion about setting a precedent, M2 versus M1, but I'm happy to see that the legislation is very specific in saying that, as you alluded to, Mr. Chairman, that whatever zoning the body ends up being comfortable with, the only use being permitted is for Guam Power Authority to have a power plant there. And that you essentially are setting the variance for that lot, depending on what you end up zoning it. But I think it's a valid concern that if you upzone to M2, would that encourage other people to do that? So I leave that to you. I think it's a good concern. From my zoning background and all that, I think if you took the more conservative zoning of M1 with the designation of a power plant, I think you would cover all these concerns about not setting an unnecessary precedent. Senator, Vice Speaker Terlahi, even though you're zoned M1 doesn't mean you will be permitted to do whatever you want. Just like you can be zoned R2, and we see that community opposition or other opposition from the government saying you're not building the right project, or you don't have the experience, or you're not funded. All those things contribute to whether a lot gets developed or not. So the designation in and of itself doesn't guarantee that you're going to get what you want. And in this case, this is a great example. We are having to prove to our community that this rezoning is in the best interest of the community. I think the questions about the aquifer, I want to thank Weary and the University of Guam and Dr. Jensen. He is the man when it comes to the aquifer, and I know one of the landowners was concerned about it. You asked the right questions, Senator Terlahi, and he confirmed that this plant does not pose a risk to the part of the aquifer that we would ever use to pull up good drinking water. And if there is ever an accident, remember that GPA is going to put in secondary, tertiary berms and protection for all the tanks that we have. We're going to do everything we can to protect the fact, any explosion that might occur there, to contain it. And then, as Dr. Jensen pointed out, even if there was some flow off the plant, it would flow away, essentially away from the useful part of the aquifer. It would flow away from the closest pump. Similarly, one of the reasons we're confident with this location is because we checked with Weary. And what I liked about it is, you don't have to believe GPA, but if you don't believe Weary, I'm not sure what other expert you would go to. They are the experts in the aquifer. We do a lot of collaboration on the aquifer, both GPA and GWA as part of the buildup. We have more information about this aquifer than we had 7 years ago because of this collaboration. And I think it's with the confidence that Dr. Jensen has. He's confident, and we're confident, that with regards to risk to the aquifer, there is a minimal risk to our drinking water or any water that might be in that aquifer that might be impacted. I think to help clarify the way this plant is not going to use 3 million gallons a day that is currently being used to produce energy. Two of our plants down there draw fresh water. That fresh water is drawn from the aquifer. So that's what John was saying. That's 3 million gallons a day that currently is being used. When we put the plant up there, we will stop drawing that 3 million gallons from the aquifer as our primary source of cooling. We're going to use the gray water at GWA, and this is something that Joey, John, and I, and everyone on the CCU, we've been wanting to do this. Ken Flores, we've been wanting to do this for a decade when we knew that we could upgrade the gray water, the wastewater plant, and use that gray water. And I think to one of the landowners, the use of gray water in power plants is often used. We're not inventing anything new. It's commonly used as a source of cooling for power plants. So that's why we use that logic. And by using gray water, we won't be pulling 3 million gallons a day out that we currently are. The aquifer becomes our backup. If there was an emergency, if GWA's plant had to be shut down, then John's going to turn a faucet, and all of a sudden, for at least until we get the plant back on, we'll be drawing from the aquifer. But right now, we draw from the aquifer every day, 3 million gallons a day. Under this plant, we would only draw in case of emergency. So there's that extra bonus to the aquifer where this new plant will not be needing 3 million gallons a day. It will save money for ratepayers because GWA sells potable water at the highest price, even to GPA. We can sell gray water at a much lower price, which means the cost on the power side to our power ratepayers will be lower. Because right now we buy 3 million gallons a day from GWA at a higher price. We would be buying 3 million gallons a day of gray water from GWA at a much lower price. And that's part of the savings when John is calculating. We talk about this $80 million in savings. And that's on top of the fuel. That doesn't include the fuel savings. When you take the fuel savings and the infrastructure savings, you're talking about $130 million of energy benefits to the entire community. And that's going to be the challenge of all of us. That's the trade-off that everyone is talking about. Reducing the energy costs for our community requires us to put this plant someplace. And there's no perfect place to put any plant. You've heard all the discussions about what about this and what about that, and those are very valid concerns. But as Mr. Manzano said, Dusseldorf just put a 600 megawatt plant in the middle of a mixed-use community. Maybe their property values went up or down. You know, that's hard to say. You can cite a study. I like the fact that they're citing Harvard studies, but I'll be the first to tell you that don't believe everything that you hear from people from Harvard, so including myself. So there's always going to be risk, and what we looked at is how do we minimize the risk and maximize the benefit for the ratepayers so that we can move along an energy curve that we've been wanting to do for a long, long time, which is to move Guam away from its dependence on oil, move into renewables, and replace our aging plants with plants that can talk to renewables, use less fuel, and be the bridge that we want that will take Guam to, there was a young lady here. I believe, and many of us believe in the power business, that in the next 25 to 50 years, the amount of energy that Guam will get from oil will continue to fall dramatically, and all that money will be put back into the economy. As we described earlier that we're going to have 180 megs of renewable energy. We are now putting on 40 megs of battery storage, so we're going to have 225 megawatts of distributed energy resources. Our community already makes 15 megawatts of energy on their own. The way we make energy and the way we distribute energy is changing. This plant allows us to make the change that will move us on a long-term basis away from the heavy reliance on oil to a much cleaner resource, probably mostly solar. And if we have to burn any fuel, we'll burn a cleaner fuel, we'll burn less of it, and the overall mix will mean lower energy costs for the community. But we have to put this plant somewhere. And it is tough if you're the neighbor of the plant to be worried about it. But as we've shown, and to GRMC's point, the medical facilities that we showed in Maytep, every function that GRMC is planning to add, which is wonderful, all those functions are going on in these hospitals that are located right next to that power plant. Their patients see it as well. We had the other slide, but what they see is there's no plume. You see development around these plants. So clearly these plants have not hurt the ability to develop your property, and communities have said this is the best solution for them. As we close coal plants around the country, as we mothball nuclear plants around the country, the technological choice is the kinds of generators that we are planning to bring to Guam. So, and all those other communities would have the same concerns. Property values, does it do anything to the aquifer? Can you coexist in a community? And yet hundreds of communities are saying, when you add it all up, the risk of locating it here versus the energy benefits, the economic benefits to the community overall, they are saying, put this kind of plant in their community. And part of the reason is because it can coexist so well within that community. And that's why we want to do it as well. The other thing, you know, and studies are interesting, and well, I'll get back to that in a second. So the CCU is in the same position that the body is. We're elected just like you. And we've been working on this for a long, long time, and not just the 5 of us that are sitting here. We go back about 15 years when the CCU started. We have always said, how do we get to renewables? How do we get to reducing our dependence on oil? And we have long wanted to put this kind of technology in place, and we now have that opportunity. And that's why collectively, this idea has been in the Integrated Resource Plan of the Guam Power Authority for 10, 12 years now. Ken Flores worked on it. John's about to build it. It was there when Joey joined us. It was Judy and I worked on it as original members. We have looked at this and said, this is the right move for us. 10 years ago, we got together with Senator Pangilinan, and we said, we want to talk about a renewable portfolio. And to his credit, he said, he worked with us and he said, if you can have reliable, stable power, how about if you can get 25% of your power into renewables by 2035? We're happy to report that we're going to have 25% of our energy coming from renewables by 2021, 14 years ahead of schedule. Now, Ben would probably tell us, Simon, what took you so long, right? But the point is, we are now on the path to reducing the energy costs of the entire community if we can be allowed to place this plant there. So that's the trade-off. And the elected members of the CCU have consistently said, in our view, based on the experts that we hire, we think this is the right technological choice, and now we have supported this decision to put it here, and we're here to ask for you to support that. So when you think about the trade-offs, everything has risks. The study that was cited by GRMC, I got a chance to look at it. So it's 3,000 deaths over 13 years across 93% of the zip codes of the United States. So it's pretty much the entire country. So the valid concern is the number of deaths that might increase is about 250 deaths a year spread out across the entire country might occur. If our criteria was that tight, that we want to prevent 250 more deaths, we'd be outlawing guns, we'd be outlawing cars, we'd be outlawing many things that create the same risk that you might lose 200 people a year across the entire country. That's what this study says. So again, just because a study might say something at a macro level doesn't mean it applies to Guam. And if we're going to insist on no risk, then you would be outlawing a lot more than just this power plant. So this is really a decision about risk. You know, what is the risk of putting this plant here? What is the risk of not putting this plant here? And in our view, we think as we assess the risks on both sides, we're saying that this is the best location for the community. We'll be good neighbors. Our neighbors already have mixed-use zonings. There's a mall, there's a hospital, there's a substation, there's a sewer treatment plant. There used to be a power plant a few miles away, and now there's going to be a Marine base. So that whole area has been zoned for mixed use. And as we have tried to show and to our community that these plants exist in mixed uses. So I'm not convinced that just because we put it there, the hospital can't expand. You see hospitals next to plants. Mr. Cabot can't build his commercial development. You see those pictures, lots of commercial development around these plants. And other neighbors can do whatever they want to do when they want to and when they're able to. And these plants coexist. We've got the buffer zone in there. We've thought of everything we can do to make it safe and to lower the costs. And that's why, at the end of the day, as you decide whether to allow us to proceed by rezoning this property, you're going to think about risks. And I ask you to think about the community at large. We have an opportunity to lower the community's energy costs over the next 25 to 30 years by putting this plant in the location we're asking you to rezone. It is the best location to put it. It saves the most money for ratepayers, and it builds that bridge because of the technology that it offers that will allow our children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren to finally move away from oil, use renewable energy, and return all that money that we currently send to Singapore back into the pockets of our people, including hospitals, including our neighbors, including all of us. And that's your trade-off. In our view, the collective view of the CCU and GPA over the many years is that we believe this is the best place for the community, and we ask that you would support us in this effort by rezoning this property. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Benavente, do you have any closing comments, final closing comments, brief comments?
So, Mr. Chairman, we'll go ahead and answer some of these questions in written. I can answer a few if you care.
Well, what we'll do is we'll compile, the staff will compile from the recordings the questions that were asked, and we'll transmit it to GPA, and hopefully you'll be able to respond to them. Keep in mind that we're looking at reporting out the bill in time for the February 19th session. So you're going to need to start working on it.
Yes,
and
we'll
get it in by next
right
week.
Just a quick closing statement, Mr. Chair. I can assure you the plan will be safe and quiet. Very clean emission. US EPA, I mean, the standard is US EPA, and even Guam EPA could have more stringent standards than US EPA. But all those are the standards of the land that we try to that we have to comply with to be able to permit a plan, whether it's there in Okudu or anywhere in the middle, down in Umatic or anywhere, no? Diversified fuel options, really, I hear a lot today about the environment, and despite all the mentioning we've had about clean environment, but I also hear a lot of cries every time the LEAC goes up, every time, fuel prices start going up, and again, it's up to about $70 a barrel, and we came from $120 a barrel. Very major impact on the community in terms of cost. The plan that we have put together, really, like I mentioned, and maybe I didn't explain it as well, will stabilize our rates and hedge us stabilize the cost into the future. Eliminates tsunami and storm surges. So again, it's really, we can answer a lot of the questions that are there, but we also, just one point on this, terms of the emission, and as GRMC pointed, it's 1.0 was the study. The new power plant is going to bring it to is really 3.54 versus the 1. But let's not forget that today the standard as approved by USEP and everything is actually 35. And that Cabras 1 and 2 and them are at 26.5. So if really that's that true, then we better fix this power plant and get down to 3.5 versus all those people down at PD, Port Authority area, Asan, Nimitz Hill, that has been living with this emissions for the past 60 years. There's an opportunity now to really clean the environment with ultra-low sulfur diesel. That will, and it's just not in their backyard at this point. So again, there's a bigger picture here that I need to communicate, because this is what I hear and what I see as a general manager for the Power Authority. So again, clean emission, much cleaner than what's down there. That would also help the old the people down in the south. So let's not forget that not in my backyard doesn't mean, just right there in the Okudu area. There's a lot of people down there at the Port Authority. You probably heard some things that happened. Not that it's directly related, but however, taking care of this issue the way we're trying to do that would actually eliminate all of those type of concerns. So That's my closing statement, Mr. Chair. This is really an opportunity for us to reduce our costs, to engage renewables, hedge against the future, provide clean emissions, reduce aquifer requirements.
Okay.
And that's it, Mr. Chair.
Great. Thank you very much. Vice Speaker, you had some questions?
Just wanted to ask, what other legislative action is required before you can proceed with the power plant? Because you've already got the authorization for the borrowing, right? Or the bond? Or
Well, we would be doing, if you do it through the IPP model, actually the private partner would be providing the financing. We are looking at the possibility of us providing our own financing because now we're investment grade. When we did the IPPs 20 years ago, I had hair and John's hair was darker. We had to use their money, and it proved to be very expensive.
Yeah. So is there any other legislative action that's
No,
required?
no,
So this zoning, it's only because you picked this property?
Right. Once you
That's
rezone
So
it,
if you had picked another property that was already M2, you wouldn't be here today? There would be no legislature review of where you're putting the
well,
plant?
as you noted, the M1 and M2 zoning designations don't really specifically say power plants, sewer plants. That's what the chairman was alluding to, is that the way the infrastructure of Guam got built, it was put on places that weren't zoned at all. And so when you look at M1 and M2, there's actually no, unlike other communities, there's a specific zone for a power plant.
Are you saying you're not allowed in an M2 zone to build
No,
a
what
power
we're saying-
plant?
what
You
we're
would
s-
still need legislative approval? That's not what I understood
The
from
reason
Department
we're
of Land
before you, the reason we're before you is that there is no zone on Guam, M1 or M2, that specifically says you can build a power plant.
Okay.
And so normally we would go to GLUC with an M1 lot. Let's say if we're permitted, we'd buy this lot, we'd have to go to GLUC and ask for a variance to build a power plant. We're basically asking you to act like GLUC, pull back that power just in this one isolated case where you are making the variance decision, and you're also going to decide whether you're going to keep it M1, move it to M2, but the key piece is the variance. Because right now, under the planning zones we have in Guam, you can't find a place for a wastewater plant, transmission line. There's no zone for it, right? There's no specific, so you'd almost always have to beg a variance, or as the chairman noted, a lot of this stuff was just put on the ground. Nobody asked about zoning. That's just where the substation went. That's where the pump station went.
Okay.
And so you're correcting that.
All right, does the, sometimes what you're presenting is why we need a new power plant versus why we need to put the new power plant in this exact location. And I think that's sometimes very confusing for people, even for me, listening to this.
Right.
But so the argument, I don't need to hear necessarily why we need a new power plant. I think
Right.
we all understand what has happened. And so we need a new power plant, and that it would have increased efficiencies, cost savings, and lots of benefits for the community, less emissions, right? Yeah, so.
And one
could you
more
just-
thing. The cost to run the transmission line from the proposed location versus putting it next to the next best location, which was putting it next to the wastewater treatment plant, the additional cost to put it by the GWA treatment plant is $35 million. And if you borrow that money over 25, 30 years, it costs $80 million to borrow $35 million. That's what we mean. So that's the most compelling piece of why that location was selected versus putting it right next to the wastewater treatment plant. 10 years ago, we were saying, put it right next to the plant. We liked it. But as we looked at it, John picked up the key point. 60% of our load flows through that substation. The closer we are to that substation, the cheaper it is to build that plant. So if we move it next to the wastewater plant, you're going to add $35 million plus the cost of borrowing it to ratepayer costs. And we just felt, given all the trade-offs, it's better to put it next to the substation. We'll even put in a dedicated line for GRMC because they fit into that model of making sure hospitals have direct care. It makes, a direct access to power.
So in your chart where you're talking about the why Ukudu is the best location, you're there. When you say the 115 kV interconnection cost, this is to the
from the
Dedido
plant
substation,
to the substation.
the Harmon substation. That's what you call it, right? Across
From
Micronesia Walk.
from the waste treatment. If we had the power plant at the wastewater treatment site, the transmission costs and other thing will cost us about 80 million more.
Right, so they're different, to connect to that one station. Is there any other comparable station?
No.
It's the heart of the system, and you're putting the biggest base load up. You want to connect them.
You have to go to a
Well,
substation.
where do you connect now from Cabras?
From Cabras.
Yeah.
So we run all that power up from Cabras. We leak some of the power that we send from Cabras because we got to run it 10, 12 miles, and one more savings for ratepayers.
Okay, so on your chart, it says that connectivity from Cabras is low, the same as from Ukudu.
That's correct, but it doesn't address all the other issues like there's no space, like tsunami vulnerability.
So there's
all
not enough
the
room
other
to-
issues, although we looked at all the criteria
I know,
and
but
we
you-
marked it.
but on the-
So therefore,
but
that's the reason why. Now, let me also add on the transmission lines. There's going to be a lot more cost. The transmission line that goes from Cabras now goes through the mountains and then comes right through Sinahanya.
Right, but on your
So-
chart, you've said it's the same, going to be the same as connecting from Ukudu, right?
No.
Low cost to connect.
Low cost to connect, but again, the whole evaluation is taking all of those 12 criterias.
Right, those are different.
And the
those are
biggest
different
thing, the
lists.
biggest thing is that there's no space
All
in
right,
Cabras.
that's not the item we're talking about. We're talking about the connectivity cost, right?
Right.
So yeah.
So if I can help you with it, the connectivity cost between Cabras, we already.
Well, on your chart, it's the same.
Right. Correct. All right. So when it comes to connectivity, you could put it in Cabras. The problem is, as John's pointed out, you
Right.
can't build a 180 megawatt plant at Cabras. There's no room, and you increase the risk for tsunami and terrorism. I mean, everyone talks about terrorism. Here's our fear. I mean, a terrorist could come to the hospital. They could come to that plant in Dededo. Here's our fear. When we had Pong San Hua, we had a fire down there, and we were at risk of not being able to get to any of the plants. So one of the lessons we learned from Pong San Hua is if you put all your plants down there, and a smart terrorist wanted to isolate the entire power system, all they got to do is take out Cabras. Now we've spread out.
Part of this plan is to spread out the power
Yeah,
system?
so that no one terrorist can ever take you out, no one weather system can, no tsunami can take out. You saw Fukushima.
That's not anywhere on this
Well, but that's-
consideration
well,
list.
So no, it isn't. When we talk about tsunami, no, John mentioned
All
two
right.
things. He mentioned
That's okay.
tsunami risk
If I could
and
just
security
ask
risk.
Another question. So, are you prohibited from connecting to the Agate water treatment plant, the Agate sewer treatment plant to Cabras?
No, it's much farther away.
Yeah, but first of all, I think we need to identify the land. Just this land that we have identified took us a year and a half because we have to go through a process to try and get the property.
Right, I just want to know.
Yeah, so therefore, even if we're going to go down to PD or any other area, first we have to identify where that land area is before we can even begin to start putting the costs or anything like that. So that's what we did. We went through the process. Those that came in to bid or those that solicited interest with their property as an opportunity for us to purchase, then we start from there and evaluating all the different criteria, knowing that we don't have any space in Cabras, we don't have any space in Tengisan to put a power plant of this size.
If you ruled Cabras out, why do you include it in this comparison chart as
Because-
if you weighed it as an option, and now you're trying to tell me
No.
it was never an option because we want a bigger place?
People ask
No.
us, why don't you put it in Cabras?
Yeah, the
that's
question-
why we
Correct, which is what
that's
I'm
why we
also-
evaluate
I want
it.
to make it very clear during this hearing. That is the big question. Why are we not putting it in Cabras? Why are we going to go to a place that might
Okay.
entail,
So that's why we evaluated
affecting
it.
other landowners and affecting adjacent properties? And so I just want to make it very clear. So I'm trying to use the criteria that you've presented to us and just make that very clear.
All right.
So,
So to be clear, we did evaluate Cabras
right,
as a location.
it's on your
And it did
comparison
not,
chart.
and it had other
look at all
challenges.
the red that is there, Madam Speaker, including if it was in Cabras versus the location that we have, it costs us another $1.5 million a year in line losses.
In what?
Line losses. When you transmit power from
Is that on this list here? Where's that?
Where if you
System technical losses?
yes, increases versus reduces. So reduces is putting a number to that. That's about $1.5 million a year in savings. That
Why is that?
because when power is communicated, transmitted from one area to another, the resistance through the lines and all of that causes losses. No? And so
it's
therefore you
because
can,
of the distance?
that's correct. Distance, sizes, and all of that. So that's another, the 80 million that we talk about was just from that one, just the transmission cost. But there are other inherent savings from that location. See?
All right, well, when Mr. Lasongan said that you said that $80 million savings for this location, it's not clear that 80 million from this location versus 80 million for a new power plant, because when I asked you, you gave me 3 criteria how you came up with your 80 million. Some of that is just because we're building a new power plant. We're going to save in fuel costs, and we were going to save. So maybe.
No,
and these are not costs. These, the way they're described, it says system technical losses increase. But yeah, perhaps you just need to explain your 80 million versus what was the savings going to be if you had built it in Cabras or any of these other places that you compared. But I guess it's very awkward now, because now you're saying you really never compared Cabras, but it's on your comparison list.
No, Senator, we did compare Cabras, and one of the things that we ruled out that helped contribute to ruling out is it's not big enough. So so what happens? Now you build a smaller plant.
I understand. Okay.
Well, no, you build a smaller plant, but he still needs his 180 megs,
I
and
understand.
we'd have to build a smaller plant, and then still figure out where do you get the rest of the power. So we evaluate all those, and we did look at Cabras. But when you add all those criteria, and others we didn't list, we didn't want to list 500 criteria, but we looked at all those criteria. These are the most common. And we add the pluses and the minuses. You look at the reds at Cabras, and we're saying for the reasons in red, we eliminate it as a site because in the end it would end up costing ratepayers more or provide insufficient energy because it's too small. And we then have to still figure out where do you put a plant that gives you the rest of the energy.
All right, well, that's not what your chart shows. Your chart compares Cabras as if it was a possibility, and you rate it. You never say it's impossible for this type of plant that you are trying to build.
We're not saying it's impossible. We're saying it doesn't produce the same amount it doesn't have enough room to produce the amount of energy we seek. It is possible to put a plant down there, but it won't be 180 megs, and he showed you what happens if you don't have 180 megs of new baseload power. We're going to be at risk.
Are you debating not to build 180 megs?
No.
Is that a question? See, that's what I'm saying. That's confusing when you throw those kinds of things in, because the presumption is we're looking at building a 180 meg plant. Where are we going to put it? But now you're throwing in the possibility of building something less.
No, because when you evaluate a site, we're talking about a site. That's your question, is on the site, right?
Yes.
So
I'm
one
trying
reason
to use your chart the way you guys presented it to us. If it could not fit on Cabras, then all right, I'm gonna.
Then we're sorry we didn't put that on the chart, but that's the main reason.
But
we're sharing it with you now. Now you know the reason. I'm sorry it wasn't in the chart, but if you try to force it into Cabras, you won't get 180 megs, and that's what we need.
I think.
I want to make sure that's on the record. Then that's
on the record now.
That's your findings, that you cannot put it at Cabras.
That is the way we understand the technical argument presented by our management team to the CCU, which is why we supported it and why we rejected Cabras. So we're sharing with you why we, the elected representatives of the ratepayers, agree that it shouldn't be at Cabras. And it's not just money; it's also other things.
Okay. Then the last thing I want to ask is, because you're from the CCU, so you represent GWA also, if you could give us something in writing regarding the aquifer, because this argument that this may contaminate a certain portion of the aquifer but not the usable portion of the aquifer, I really want that in writing from the people we are trusting our aquifers.
Sure. We would support the weary conclusion we would share the same
Well,
conclusion.
they don't have that conclusion in writing either.
Mr. Jensen, Dr. Jensen said.
No, I've asked him to submit that in writing,
well, he
because
will,
all he
and-
said is that,
Yeah, we will put in writing that we agree with Dr. Jensen's evaluation that that plant is not a threat to the aquifer.
Dr. Jensen did provide a written statement.
I know, but when I spoke with him earlier, his conclusion is that it's going to affect an unusable part of the aquifer. That's not in his statement
Correct, so
at
it
all.
won't threaten potable
And so
water.
I'm asking you if that's your conclusion, put that in writing, please, because, you know, years from now, we want to know where that information came from. Why did the legislature rely on it? If we're going to
Perfect.
rely on it, then I would like to see that in writing.
Happy
And-
to do that. Happy to do that, Senator.
Okay. So there being no further testimonies or questions, the committee certifies that this public hearing is complete and that Bill 223-34 has been duly heard. It is now 9:41, and we are now adjourned. Thank you.